Great. Thanks, Alicia and everyone. So yeah, I'm excited to, can everybody hear me? Somebody hear me? Okay, great, thanks. Just to be sure. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Alicia and Steve, for suggesting this topic. I'll focus on just giving a short little introduction from where I'm coming from when I think about normalizing, talking about data. But I'm really excited to just kind of prime the conversation and so we can learn together. Yeah, I think the blurb that I wrote that's in the doc here is I really think that normalizing talking about data is a big part of our work. But it's often not the immediate focus of our work. It's like this kind of silent pre-work we have to do in order to best support our communities. So yeah, just as many resources as we can have and shared experiences. So let's see, I guess I will screen share. A link to my slides are in the Google Doc, and I can also put them in the chat. So if you want to follow along yourselves, but since we're recording, screen sharing will probably be better to capture that. So let's see. Alicia, do you mind stopping screen sharing and then I'll be able to start?
Oh.
There we go, great.
Sorry, I didn't even realize I was doing that.
No worries at all. Let's see. Can you all see that on my screen? Great, thank you. I love the thumbs up. Yeah, so I just put together a couple slides to help us get started. But this is about normalizing, talking about data. And so the first story that jumps into my mind with this is as a carpentries instructor going up to somebody else's computer and looking over their shoulder and asking them what they're attempting to do or what they need my help with. And I've had this experience several times where there will be this awesome scientist that's there in this workshop learning how to code. And as I'm looking over their shoulder, they're like, well, let me tell you about the study site and my motivation for my research and my experimental design and all these things I'm trying to do. And what it comes down to is that they're trying to rename their variables, or they're trying to operate as a group or reiterate something, but they're trying to do something and they just have no practice in saying what they need. They have practice in talking about their science, but they don't have practice talking about their exact needs. And so this is like a trigger to me or a flag to me that they're not experienced in talking about this, which is fine. That's why they're at this carpentries workshop. But it's not only about learning the skills and the typing and the code, but it's about talking about it too. So another story is still kind of a scarring experience for me and motivator for me in my work is that when I was a PhD student, I spent a long time reading the literature for my study system in order to try to figure out how to reformat dates in MATLAB. So I'm a squid ecologist. I was reading all of this literature, like the places you go to when you need help with your science. I was looking there to help with my data problems. And there's a couple things that stand out to me from that is, first of all, I just could not decouple what were my research questions and what were my data questions. And so that sent me to the wrong place to look for help. And the second thing is I had this mentality that pain was part of science. My research questions have never been asked before, so I shouldn't expect that my data questions have ever been asked before either. So I spent a lot of wasted time and sort of demoralizing time because I couldn't talk about this. So I think, if I sort of off the cuff think about what happens if you don't talk about data, it's hard to articulate your needs because you don't have the vocabulary to express yourself. And it's hard to even conceptualize your needs. And this is something I've talked with Steph Butland about quite a bit. You don't have the mental models to even have a conceptualization in order to articulate. And I think it's hard to expect that there's a better way. And so one example I give when I teach a carpentries workshop is I give the example of the idea of breakfast. So if you're going to learn a new language, you have a concept in your mind that there is a thing called, there is a first meal of the day. And maybe in this new language you're learning, there should be a word for that. So in Spanish, it's desayuno. But when you're learning to code, you don't have like the expectations of concepts. So you don't, so this all like kind of confounds, and it's really hard to think about what you're trying to do. So, you know, if you're talking about like combining data together, like joining is one way to be able to conceptualize that. But if you're not even, if you're not even thinking of data in different places and how to combine them, it could be really hard. Anyway, that was just the beginning of that thought, but I'd love to talk about that more. So this is a quote that just like totally summarizes for me all of this. So the quote is, if you want to learn how to write, you read a lot. And if you want to learn how to play music, you listen a lot. But it's really hard to do this with data analysis. And this is a quote from some of the leaders in the R community who were talking at the R Studio conference earlier this year. And it's actually part of their podcast. It was their 100th episode of their podcast. And, you know, this is a podcast all about data and data science and analysis. And it's been super formative to me in not only having me become a more confident coder, but me becoming a more confident person talking about data, because I never thought you could have a podcast about data or data analysis, but the concepts they talk about and the struggles and the things that they daylight have been really powerful. So omitting a lot of other backstory, I'll talk to you a little bit just about Openscapes, which is this program I run now, which is really focused on empowering scientists with open data science, which is what I'm defining right now as the tooling and people enabling reproducible, transparent, and inclusive practices for data analysis. So one of the core features of Openscapes is the Champions Program, which is a mentorship program for research teams, and it's around data, open data science. So this is some details about the program, but the focus, it's really discussion-based mentorship. So it's not hands-on training, but it's really, we talk about data, we talk about data analysis, we talk about collaboration, we talk about software, we talk about the mindsets and the habits that you need for these things, and help folks develop these skills as a team so that they can practice open data science together. And some of the biggest impacts so far have been that research teams are working more openly together, partly because they're developing this shared vocabulary, shared concepts, shared skill sets around software, but they're also developing this trust and bravery around talking about their data challenges. And so it's been really cool to see how much this can empower science teams. And a couple of the lessons so far from Openscapes are really, for me, it's the power of teams to normalize open science, to give folks other people to talk to and have them feel included in that. And also, so the power of talking about data as a way to increase confidence and increase inclusion and increase the practice of reproducible practices, data science, open science. So some of the, let's see, summarizing some of these ideas from the first cohort of research teams I worked with through Openscapes, we published a paper called Supercharger Research, a 10-week plan for open data science. And the 10-week plan is really, it's a table of ideas to talk as things to watch or read or listen to in order to prime discussions in your research team. But the three bigger concepts that came out of this summary is to really, first of all, normalize talking about data, like set aside time for your lab to talk about data, like have a place that people can come to ask questions and teach each other. And through that, you'll start identifying shared needs that you can address in different ways, depending on what they are, whether that's going to a carpentries workshop, whether that's teaching a new course, whether that's listening to a podcast. And then also this idea of thinking ahead always, not only for yourself in the future, who is your most important collaborator, but also thinking ahead that you won't be alone in the future, that you might have a new student or a new lab mate, or you might be leading a lab. So really trying to bring these concepts forward. So what, ooh, that was a bit of a fade. And we'll in our breakout rooms, we were going to talk about, the prompts are to talk about the challenges that you have in your communities around normalizing talking about data, which is you taking what are a couple go-to resources that you share with your community members when you're trying to excite them about data. So I'll share just a few examples quickly from Openscapes, and then we can go into breakout groups. So some of the challenges I see, there's challenges for researchers. And if I think back to myself and folks in the Carpenters Workshop, there's this feeling that it's too late for you, like that you somehow missed out and everybody else learned how to code and talk about data and it's just you. So there's that feeling. And there's also a feeling for a lot of folks who are self-taught, there's like a sort of a shame or embarrassment about sharing their homegrown systems. And so I think that that's a barrier for getting people to be able to talk about data science, but also participate in open science. And they also often feel like they don't have a team. And that's true even if they're in a research lab working on similar science. Data analysis is often still this individual burden and not this collective activity. So that's been a challenge that we've been working on with Openscapes. And then there's also challenges more broadly, where I think a big one for me is data science and science are up in conversations, and I really see them as absolutely integral for everybody. And then also like this, without training in data science and open science, lack of visibility for it, there's a lack of it, and there's a lack of support for it. It's this reinforcing soul, unfortunately. And then also there's just so many different audiences to engage when we're talking about open data science. Some approaches we're taking with Openscapes is about storytelling, using some of our science experiences like this path to better science in less time using open data science tools, but also with stories like Star Wars and stories from teaching and stories from other, I think about analogies a lot. And we also use a lot of art and to try to convey our stories and feelings. And then also showcasing from the community all the time, showcasing tools that people are building, lessons they're developing, use cases, and just trying to welcome more scientists into this awesome open source community. And then just to end on two go-to resources that I always share with my community, this visual of the data science cycle from Hadley Wickham and Garrett Gerlman really changed my whole thinking about data analysis, and that there's these concrete steps that apply to everyone, no matter where you are. So this would help you sort of get out of looking in the cephalopod literature earlier. And then also, I mentioned Nations, the podcast earlier, but this episode in particular, where Jenny Bryan is talking about Excel spreadsheets, was transformative for me. I've never heard anybody talking about spreadsheets. They discussed my pain and they talked beyond it, and it was really, really empowering. So that's what I pass on to others. All right, so I'll end there and pass it back over to Alicia to talk about the breakout groups.